So I says to Mabel, I says, bigotry? How big a tree we talking? Okay, stupid intro over. I've been meaning to make this video for a long time, but I'll spare you the excuses. When I made my last video on chapter 363, I addressed Skull Knight and the Archmage talking about how Skull Knight lost his humanity long ago and is basically now just an automaton that exists for the sole purpose of putting an end to the God Hand and all the apostles. I felt that Skull Knight's actions throughout the story just really didn't reflect that idea. In fact, I think Skull Knight is one of the most human characters in the entire series. And to demonstrate that, I brought up his friendship with multiple characters, especially Flora, his decision to save Luca from the Tower of Conviction, and his decision to save Guts and Casca from the Eclipse. I got a great comment from a dude named Pedro, who brought up how Skull Knight saving Guts and Casca from the Eclipse could be interpreted not as a display of compassion, but just as another step in his goal to do anything he can to get in the way of the God Hand. And that really got me thinking about his motives and actions as a whole throughout the story. My response to his comment was basically that he had a good point, and that I think Skull Knight had many reasons for saving Guts and Casca, one being, like he said, doing anything he can to get back at the God Hand, but I think getting the chance to prevent someone else from suffering the same fate as him was a serendipitous bonus that wasn't lost on him, and on top of that, he knew that down the line, Guts would also want vengeance on the God Hand and would become a strong ally. As we learn more and more about him, the idea of him being what he said in the last chapter, a portent of doom, the remnant of a grudge, with an ever singular goal and without the heart to bathe in the lambency of its mortal days, is really starting to sound like something he's trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Let's look closer at Guts and Skull Knight's first meeting and the Eclipse. Skull Knight first appears to warn Guts about the bad stuff that's about to go down. Him warning Guts definitely contributes to his goal of doing anything he can to get in the way of the God Hand, and as I also said, I think he genuinely does want to stop Guts from going through what he did. There is one thing, however, about the Eclipse that I think is completely altruistic though, and that is his decision to save Casca. Think about it. If his goal were simply to cause as much trouble for the God Hand as possible, allowing Casca to be killed in the Eclipse would cause Guts to have no other purpose than getting revenge on them himself. But since she did survive, Guts' primary purpose later became to protect Casca and return her to her true self. This indicates that Skull Knight does genuinely care about the happiness of Guts and Casca over the idea of pure revenge and nothing else. Sure, Guts becoming a powerful ally in the fight against the God Hand was part of the plan, but it wasn't the only thing he cared about. He also made sure to guide Guts after the Eclipse by telling him what exactly it means to be branded and what he needed to do in order to survive and protect Casca. Now let's move forward a bit to the Tower of Conviction and Luca. It's no surprise that Skull Knight would show up to that party, but when Luca fell from the tower, Skull Knight rode to save her without a second thought. Saving her had no benefit to his fight with the God Hand, and yet this unfeeling monster played the hero yet again. Not only that, but he was downright friendly with her. And when she was convinced that she had died and he was actually the Grim Reaper taking her to the afterlife, his responses to her were dry, but still kinda playful, and he told her to stay with his horse so that she would remain safe. And when the Egg of the Perfect World showed up, he defended her. And after the egg captured her, he went right after her to make sure she was safe. After he got Luca to safety, he warned her to run away from the tower, but when she said she couldn't do that because her friends needed her, Skull Knight even stops to internally admire her for her bravery in the face of literal hell on earth. It really doesn't get much more human than that. Skull Knight's next appearance is when Guts faces Slan in the Qliphoth. Here he continues his mentor role to Guts and helps him escape with his new Sword of Actuation. Here he gets to fulfill all his goals at once. He gets to help out Guts again and give a huge bony middle finger to the God Hand. Void can't even give a middle finger back because he's got 6 of them. Next up, we get to see him as a friend to Flora. We even see Flora questioning his motivations herself, with her asking him if he's doing this out of pity for a fellow struggler, or if he's just using Guts. And he is here on business because he's asking Flora to prepare the Berserker armor for Guts. This is the object that ended up taking Skull Knight's own life, and now he's passing it on to Guts. This is where stuff gets a little complicated. This is obviously a big threat to Guts, but without it, the trials that he's about to face would surely kill him much faster than the armor possibly could on its own. The armor is a necessary evil, and Skull Knight is sure to warn Guts about all the dangers that come with it. Flora's tree mansion is then attacked. She tells him that with her powers being so weak that she's finished either way, but he chooses to stay and fight for his old friend even though it's too late to save her. And she really appreciates the gesture. This is another point where his goal of taking on the God Hand lines up with his emotional desires. After the battle and Flora is lost, Skull Knight appears before Guts and an emotionally distraught Shirka. He goes back to his mentor role where he gives Guts the warnings about the armor's danger and reveals his past with Flora to Shirka, telling her that the relationship that he had with Flora is very similar to the one that Shirka has with Guts. The warnings that he gives are deadly serious, and you can tell that he wants those warnings to sink in. Shirka lets Skull Knight know that she'll never allow Guts to suffer the same fate as him. Skull Knight warns Guts that if he continues his journey, he will continue to encounter apostles, and eventually he's going to run into Griffith himself. Skull Knight knows that right now all Guts really cares about is restoring Casca's former self, and he's totally fine with that. However, he does know that Guts can never forget his other mission, and that his fate is in the interstice between protecting Casca and getting revenge on Griffith. I really get the feeling that Skull Knight is going through some very similar inner turmoil himself. I get the feeling that Skull Knight may soon have to make a choice himself between his own humanity and his lust for vengeance. But I'll talk about that a little later. Skull Knight inquires about them seeking Elfhelm to request that the Elf King use her magic in order to restore Casca's mind. Okay, let me try to clear up a little confusion. At least this is confusion that I had, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other people had the same confusion. Apparently the word that gets translated to Elf King, which for some reason is left untranslated in this one instance as Hanafubuku, is a title in Japanese that is gender neutral, and that's why it gets translated to king instead of queen. But according to a Reddit post, the literal translation of that is Flower Storm King. But that's why she's referred to as king instead of queen, apparently. At least if this Reddit post is to be trusted, and I don't see why not. But anyway, he lets them know that she is real, she is on Elfhelm, and her powers very well could work on Casca. Which actually means Puck wasn't full of shit this whole time. Again, Skull Knight genuinely does seem to care about Guts and Casca as friends, and not just as the means to help him kill the God Hand. There is, however, one disconcerting yet brutally honest warning that comes with this good news, and that is, there is no guarantee that your wish will be her wish. Skull Knight's giving all the information that he has, and he wants to help, but he knows there is the distinct possibility that Casca just doesn't want to go back to the way she was after all the horrible shit she's been through. And he just doesn't want to give Guts any false hope. This statement alone says a lot about Skull Knight. Again, how he expects us to believe that he lost his humanity is beyond me. Next, he finally gets a chance to face a God Hand member himself, aside from that one time he tried to stab Void, but I don't think that was a real attack. Femto just so happens to be styling on Ganishka, and Skull Knight shows up to crash the party. Here's the thing, I have no idea what Skull Knight actually expects to happen. Sure, he has a sword that cuts through reality, but he uses it on Femto and it has literally no effect on him. All it ends up doing is cutting the border between the conscious world and the astral realm. I mean, was that his plan all along? Or did he think he could actually kill Femto? I really find the latter hard to believe. So it seems to me that he thinks cutting the fabric of reality like that and bringing the astral plane to the conscious world will somehow help him somewhere down the line. Fast forward to Elfhelm. Casca's back, but with the little caveat that she freaks the fuck out and gets flashbacks of the eclipse whenever she sees Guts. But hey, baby steps. Turns out Skull Knight is friends with everyone on the island and even remembers the old Archmage Gedfrin from when he was a little kid. It's finally time for a little bit of Skull Knight backstory as we're introduced to the dwarven blacksmith who made the Berserker armor. Guts gets to see firsthand just what Skull Knight's been through and why SK's taken such an interest in him. Remember that time Guts and Casca were marked as sacrifices and a part of Griffith's ascension to godhandhood? Yeah, same exact thing happened to Skull Knight and his lover back in the day, presumably for Void's ascension. Skull Knight, however, seems to have failed to save the one he loved, and because of that, he has dedicated himself to doing whatever it takes to be as inconvenient as skeletonly possible to the God Hand. This is where his complex motivations come into play, and why I think he's going to have to make a difficult decision at some point in the future. He's been guiding Guts throughout his journey, but it seems that these issues he's been guiding Guts through are ones that Skull Knight himself has not fully come to terms with. As I said at the beginning, Skull Knight is seemingly trying to convince himself that he has no attachment to others, and his mission to dismantle the God Hand is all that matters to him. But that's clearly not the case. That's why I think he's going to have to make a difficult choice at some point in the near future. One where he must choose between a potential opportunity to get a taste of revenge, but at the cost of the life of someone he's become attached to. Long story short, is Skull Knight really willing to sacrifice his humanity to avenge his waifu? Maybe Skull Knight will actually learn something from Guts. Guts was blinded by the same exact hatred that Skull Knight feels, and at one point was on a warpath with no goal besides hunting down every single apostle. This was Guts at his darkest point. He had no regard for his own safety or the lives for anyone around him. Remember how big of a piece of shit he was to Vargas? Remember when he killed the Count, and then when the Count's 12-year-old daughter got sad and angry at Guts, he told her to kill herself? But yeah, Guts came back from that. It was when he found out that Casca had gone missing that he had realized that she was more important than avenging the Hawks and even hunting down Griffith. Maybe Skull Knight will come to a similar realization. He does still have those very human emotions. In the last chapter, we see how close he still is with Danan, who is presumably the sister or some close relative of his lover, and we even see him go visit his beloved's grave. And that's where we leave off. I'm probably making this video at the worst time possible, because we're likely to get more information on that ominous skeleton whenever Miura decides to put down the Idolmaster and start writing again, and it's probably gonna make me look really stupid and wrong about all this speculation, but whatevs. Oh yeah, one more thing, been a while since I made my last video, and my sub count, like, almost doubled since the last video I made, so I just want to say hi to all the new people and that I appreciate everyone for subscribing. I'm going to try to be less lazy and make more videos, but honestly, there's no promises. Obligatory, please help small channel grow with like and comment and subscribe. Yeah, thanks for watching. Laters.